What's up, guys? So I want to do a video today on knife shows. And for those of you who follow my channel, you may know that I've been collecting for about 10 years, but until this calendar year, I had never been to a knife show. And I decided last year that this year I would take a look at the calendar and try to get to as many shows as I could. And so this year I've been to 3 knife shows thus far, and the 4th knife show will be coming up in a couple of weeks. So it has been a really fun ride. It really has opened my eyes up to kind of a whole nother aspect of collecting knives, which if you've never been to a knife show, then this will be a good informative video. And for those of you who have been to a show, I apologize. This will probably be very boring because everything I'm going to say is pretty self-evident. But I wanted to also talk about the differences of the shows. I've been to 3 so far, and they've all been very, very different. And the one I just got back from not too long ago here was The Gathering in Las Vegas, and I think that was the funnest. And so I'm not sure if I'm having more and more fun as I kind of understand and learn what I'm doing, but we'll talk about some format things, and we'll talk about kind of, what the pros and cons of each show are. But, like I said, I've been a transactional buyer in the past and not really embraced the social aspect. And as you go to these shows, it is inevitable that you make friends, and not only friends with other collectors, but the friends with the makers. And one thing I didn't realize was how intertwined the maker/collector relationship is. When I was buying knives 3, 4, 5 years ago, like I said, I would almost see it like a product. A company puts out a product and you try to buy it. And I was very frustrated with the fact that I was unable to get the knives that I wanted. I reached out to makers. It seemed like they never had time for me. And it all becomes much clearer as you go to these shows as to kind of why these makers make knives for who they make knives for, and why certain collectors are able to get their hands on certain knives. So basically, I'll start with the first show that I went to, which was in Solvang, and that was more of an art knife show. Now, it did feature 2 knife makers that I've collected in the past, Kirby Lambert and Les George, so it was a perfect, logical, knife show for me to go to. And not only that, it was a great show to kind of learn about knife shows. The art knife world is completely different. I can't really speak to it besides it's more expensive. It's much less social, so you don't see a lot of art knife pages out there. So I didn't know a lot of those makers, but the organizers of that show did a magnificent job. Unfortunately, I think that was the last year that show will be held in Solvang in California. But they put out a program. You get up there, very organized. I was able to enter lotteries and things like that, and I really didn't have a problem. The next show I went to was Blade Show, and we'll talk about that. And if that's going to be your first show, I think you're gonna have some issues. Which, quite frankly, I had issues, and it was my second show. Anyway, the Solvang show, one thing I remember and I can point out was I was able to score both a Kirby Lambert and a Les George, and I think that was a little bit of luck, but I think also because I had a relationship with those guys, it helped out, and I'll talk about kind of the relationships and how that helps out. Not to say because it was a pure lottery, but also you make friends with other collectors, and they go into lotteries for you, which I'm not sure if it's a known thing or a not known thing, but I'll kind of explain all that. But I was able to get those 2 knives, which was amazing. But I didn't win either of them in the lotteries. Actually, someone else won those lotteries, and they knew that I wanted to buy the knives, and the person who won the lottery did not buy those knives, so I ended up buying them. So that was an eye-opener for me, because in those, or at that show, I only entered about 4 or 5 lotteries. I was deeply paranoid. I thought to myself, my goodness, if I win 2 or 3, I don't want to be that guy who wins a lottery and can't pay for their knives. If you've never been to a show and you go to your first show, take that and throw it in the garbage. I'm just doing you a favor right now. That mindset will make you not win knives, and you want to win them at lottery because they're they're a little bit cheaper versus auctions, and I'll talk about that when I talk about The Gathering. But For the most part, if you're lucky enough to win 1 or 2 lotteries per show, you are in business. And the Solvang show, again, is a great show. It had a very good ratio of people attending the show to makers. Now, again, I didn't know a lot of those makers just because I don't know the art knife world that well, but it was awesome to talk to them. It was awesome to see the knives, and just it being my first show with kind of the food spread and the setup there. It was pretty amazing. And I met a buddy of mine, and again, starts the entire social aspect of it. That started some relationships which I have to this day, that turned into other things, which turned into other things, which turned into knives, and turns into other stuff. So I can tell you that you really cannot, if you want to build a world-class collection or you want a world-class knife, you are going to need to have help, either from the makers or from other collectors. And so therefore, you're going to have to be available and participate in social media. So Solvang was a lot of fun. Ended up with a couple knives, and I was mentally prepared for Blade Show, and I'm like, you know what? I've been to Solvang. I'm going to dominate Blade Show. Well, I just happened to get very, very lucky in Atlanta, because a friend of mine basically, showed me a lot of tips and tricks that I wouldn't have figured out for myself. So while I didn't get any knives in Atlanta, I was able to buy a bunch of steel flame stuff, which I was collecting, and that was very competitive, probably even harder to get than some knives. But I was able to really experience that show. Now, if you go to Atlanta, you're most likely not gonna win a lottery. The ratio of collectors to makers are absurd. And most of the people who go to Atlanta, I would say a lot of them, know what they're doing. So tip number 1, if you're at all interested in getting something, put your name in the hat for the lottery. I would say, as far as numerics and percentages, I would say the winners claim their knives 50% of the time, which is atrocious. But I would say 50% of the time, knife makers have to go to second and third and fourth people on the list. And it's kind of the ugly side of collecting, because I think like anyone who wins a Todd Rexford knife, who's gonna, knows they're gonna sell it, and they know they can buy that knife for $3,000 and sell it for $15,000 to $20,000. Of course, they're gonna buy that knife whether they want to keep it or not. And so it does seem like the hotter makers, the ones with better secondaries, people will collect on those. And that causes the problem, of course, because other collectors are going into all of these lotteries, and basically, if you win a Rexford, and you only have $5,000 in your pocket, and you're not going to buy any other knife, you're going to win. You're going to go pay for that Rexford, which is going to cause a cascade, because then if you win 2 or 3, you might not have enough money to buy that knife, and so on and so forth. So there's going to be issues. But the percentage of winning a lottery is so incredibly small. I would definitely say, if you're interested, go ahead and go in. The second thing is just kind of some etiquette. I've gone in for some friends. I kind of wanted some friends to go in for me. It didn't work out because I never won anything, and nor did any of my friends win anything that I wanted. But that stuff goes on all the time. So if that is in your mind that, I don't want to go in on something because it's not fair or something like that, I actually had that conversation with a buddy of mine. Get that out of your head right now. It's the only way to win. You're just going to have to be comfortable with it. I think the chances of you actually winning a lottery going in all by yourself, with all the people there, are so slim to none. So I would definitely say that it's not a taboo thing. Just don't do it at the table. And quite frankly, I saw people doing it at the table, but maybe take a step back and collect your friends and then tell them what to do and do those things. But when there were the lotteries happening, especially at the Gathering, when they're calling out numbers, I mean, people had like stacks of them in their hands, and good or bad, whether they got them, however they got them, it's fine. These things are meant to be fun. So, but Blade Show was huge, man. It was just completely overwhelming. You couldn't see everyone you wanted to see, and really Blade Show was all about the pit afterwards. I mean, the show itself, you really didn't have time to hang out with makers. There were just so many people. It was just a different environment. And the way I can kind of speak to it is, when you go shopping, right? If you go to a boutique store, that would be very similar to the Solvang show. And then you go to Costco, and there's people running around and slamming carts into each other. Good deals. Everything's there. It's amazing. It's just a totally, totally different environment. So Atlanta was a lot of fun. I did get hooked up. Now I'm going to talk about this. most people waited in line in Atlanta, and I didn't, just because, like I said, a buddy of mine really took me under his wing and kind of helped me out. Really, I mean, he didn't have to do it, but he's like, "Hey, do this, do that," and all of a sudden, I'm in the show before the show begins. I've got a pass that I can get in and out whenever I want to, and that was kind of for. I kind of got the. First class AAA look at Blade Show. Like I said again, I didn't get any lotteries, but I had the opportunity to win a lot of auctions or anything. I didn't really. I went in on a couple auctions, but I wasn't mentally prepared to win them, so I didn't. But I was able to get a lot of the first come first serve stuff. So at the end of the day, if you're just a regular Joe Schmo collector, no offense, that wasn't a negative thing. I would just say the chances of getting something really, really nice are probably going to be pretty slim. And again, I'm not judging it because I was the beneficiary of it. But these collectors who really know what they're doing, have been collecting for 10, 15 years, they spend a lot of money, they know a lot of people, they have an advantage. There's no doubt about that. And if there's something there that's awesome, then there are a few makers out there. Scratch that. There are a lot of makers that try to make it as fair as they can. But at the end of the day, those guys are always going to have an advantage. And if you think about this, and I was I had a negative bias towards it because I thought, oh gosh, these makers that hook these guys up, that's just BS. And I listened to a podcast that said, if your maker sells his knives before the show, find a new maker that you like, and all that stuff, which is all fine and dandy when it comes to, theory. But in reality, it's a very social hobby. And, you have relationships with other collectors and makers, as I've said, and who are you going to build a knife for? And if you're going to hook somebody up, who are you going to hook up? So maybe these guys build 3, 4, 5 of these things, and maybe 1 or 2 hit the table in pure first come, first serve fashion, but 2 or 3 are going to go to guys that they've been seeing for 10, 15, 20 years, who they know their family. They might, So, again, I see more clearly why this stuff is happening. Now, I'm not judging it, but there's no way to go against it, right? If 2 people ask you for something personally, and you can commit and you can give one favor, and one is a family member or a good friend, and the other is a perfect stranger, most people are gonna, go to the person that they know, and that's just human nature. So, like I said, I got really lucky with steel flame stuff. I got in pretty early. I had some good numbers. Didn't really have to. I heard stories about people waiting in line for a long time. I didn't have to do that. I just kind of walked up an hour before the show and got in before the show. It was very expensive, Solvang and Blade Show, I spent about the same amount of money, but Solvang, I got a couple knives, whereas Blade Show, I ended up with just stuff, no knives. I think I got 1 knife, but just other things that are cool. And that's another thing when you go to a show. Be careful, because it's not just knives. In fact, I would say half the show these days are pens, flashlights, knucks, you name it. There's a ton of places to go burn your money at. So when you're sitting behind your keyboard buying knives only, believe it or not, it can get a lot worse. You go to a show, that's going to be more expensive no matter how you cut it, even if you win lotteries. Anyway, so I ended up with a couple flashlights, a bunch of clips, stuff like that from Blade Show, and I thought it was a great show. I really had a good time, and spent my budget, but you didn't go over budget. But I didn't end up with any big knives. But I was extremely happy with the show and kind of what I was able to learn. All right, so fast forward to G10, and this was the funnest show out of the 3 so far. Now, it did have a lot of people. I'm going to tell you a story about collecting in general, which I thought was very, very telling. So the first thing I decided about G10 was I was going to do this one as, I didn't want these special passes. I wanted to go in enjoy the show like I thought a show should be enjoyed, not necessarily asking people for hookups or this or that. So, I get down there, and the first day of the show, I believe, is on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. I had been on vacation, so I just got back from Florida, and I probably should have done a video, but I visited a knife maker in Florida. He was excellent, a lot of fun. But I was basically traveling around, and I woke up that morning of the show at I think 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Of course, it's in Vegas, so you have no idea what time it is. They're pumping the oxygen in you, and you can get go get breakfast, have a beer anytime you want. So I'm in my shorts and t-shirt. And I walk down because I'm awake and I can't sleep, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna go grab a bite to eat downstairs. So I was on the way down. I walk by and I see a small line forming. This is like at 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock, whatever it is. And I just walk over there and I start kind of talking to the guys, and I'm probably like 5 or 6 deep or whatever it may be. And the discussion is basically people tried to line up the night before. But security came in, and you're just not supposed to be there, and I think you had to wait till 7 or 8 o'clock or whatever it was. But basically, there was several hours to go, and again, the doors didn't open till 10 o'clock, or I think it was 10 or 11. I think it was 10 o'clock, and they said you couldn't line up till probably 7 or 8 o'clock. But there were a ton of people there, and I decided, you know what, there's a crowd, I'm just going to wait in line. So I stand there, and by sheer and pure luck, they kicked out people probably an hour before, but the line just keeps getting longer and longer. And probably by 7 o'clock, there might be 100 people in line, and security is trying to kick people out. But it's like everyone's like, "Sorry, you're not kicking me in the casino, and I'm coming back, and the line's gonna be 200 long. You can kick me out all you want, but I'm not going anywhere." So boom, the line is set. So literally from 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, whenever the hell I got down there, I can't even remember. I'm going to stand in line from that time to 10 o'clock. I don't even know what I'm going to buy. I didn't even have my wallet on me. I'm just in this line, and I just get lucky, and I'm like probably 7 back, 8 back, 6 back. I don't know, something very close to the front. So once the line hits about 50, 60, things get weird in the sense of now it's ultra competitive. People are now talking about what are you going to get and where are you going. People are kind of being secretive, and they got me there who has no friggin' clue of what is going on and what I'm trying to do. And people are trying to be nice to me, but they're like, how is this guy like the 5th guy in line? What was really cool is once they moved us into right in front of the door, makers would come out and kind of give out tickets and cards, so things didn't have to be crazy. So, but I thought that was weird because they'd say, "Are you here for me?" And you could either say yes or no. And if you said yes, they gave you a card. If they said no, they didn't. And I said no to all that. I didn't. I feel like that would, the makers respect their wishes, and they only want to give the stuff out to people who really come to see them. But I thought that was pretty strange. I saw a couple people try to cut. In fact, a little story, a guy in front of me just really, everyone's trying to be as polite and as nice as possible, but as it comes closer to the doors opening, people get pretty sensitive about that stuff. So a guy, I think, cut either right in front of me or right behind, and people were giving him a super hard time about it. And he was a well-known guy. Apparently, I didn't know him, but obviously he'd been doing this for a while. So people give him a real hard time for it, and rightfully so. I think for me, I was in line for the fun of it, for the experience, and for just kind of enjoying the atmosphere as a whole. I didn't even know what I was going to get, but just watching the passion of these collectors was amazing. And then when people did get these cards and these little tickets that they were giving out, oh my God, people were stoked. And it was just cool to be around. It was fun to be around. I didn't even know what they were getting. I tried to see later, but that's another thing. It's kind of hard to get into something unless a buddy walks you in, because they're trying to explain this stuff to me, and they're all passionate about it, and they were showing me collections of stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, it's cool. I mean, I have no idea what it does. And then the irony is I realize that right now I think nothing of it, but maybe next year I'm in line again intentionally at 4 a.m. trying to get a little, bottle opener or whatever it is, because, this is kind of how collecting works. Anyway, so the doors open. I don't know what I'm getting, but I collect steel flame, so I go to steel flame. So I get a couple of cool things. Now, a couple things I'll tell you. Again, I don't like how aggressive and competitive things are. So I did see people cut in the steel flame line. They had rules, because a lot of people have these passes that they got in through a vendor, and Leonard was trying to be cool about it. He owns Steel Flame, and he's like, okay, if you got in from a vendor, you only get to buy one thing, and then if you waited in line, you get to buy three things. And I'll kind of show you what I got, or one of the couple of things that I got. So I got to buy three things. And but at the end of the day, people were cutting in line, and then they get in the line, and they would just basically say, oh, I get to buy three things or whatever it is. But my feedback is the Steel Flame did an excellent job compared to Blade Show, keeping the crowds organized. I think they did a good job getting people through. It was you waited in line, you got there, you had a ticket. Aside from people, pretty much cutting and lying, they did a good job. They were trying to control it the best they could, as far as not wanting, not making it easy for people to do that. On the other hand, the actual show is a cluster. I had my this badge here, printed up and ready to go. So I got it the day before, but most people didn't get it the day before. So then they had 5 lines going, and people were in and out. So at one point in time, I woke up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. I was there. I was number 7. And then at one point in time, I was 50 behind, and people were kind of weeding their way in. And then people would walk in the thing and not walk out. That was just a pure nightmare from an organizational standpoint. I looked at it immediately in 30 seconds. I could have set that up better, and that would have been much more of a better experience for the collectors and the vendors. I mean, they had the vendors, these well-known knife makers, sitting outside in this line, and some of them had tickets and some of them didn't, and it was just wait in line. And I think the computers went down, a door got jammed. It was a cluster, but. Beyond that, again, I'm not bitter about it because, it was all part of the experience. And at the end of the day, it really didn't cost me anything because I wasn't trying to get anything. But I did immediately identify that could have been done much, much better. Anyway, so let's see what I got from Steel Flame here. This was kind of my favorite thing that I got. They only had a handful of these. The guy in front of me, who was only supposed to get one thing, a couple of those guys got 3 things. So all the pile of skulls, all that good stuff. I was the number 2 guy who waited in line to get there, and I did not get any of the pile of skulls. They were gone by the time I got there. So I'd say that maybe the guy in front of me got a knuck and maybe a pile of skulls, but literally being at the front of that line meant nothing because while Leonard tried to make it fair, there were a couple guys that I was watching in front of me, and they were grabbing all the stuff that they knew would sell for a lot of stuff on the secondary. But I got that. That was cool. I didn't get the flashlight. The flashlight's in Oklahoma, by the way, but I got that from Oklahoma. But I got this. I got 2 of these. So all the pilot skulls were gone, so I ended up getting 2 of the lions, which is cool because I actually had 2 or 3 flashlights that needed clips. So that's cool that I got 2 of those, and I actually am waiting on another flashlight to get in so I can put that clip on there. But so that was my experience with Steel Flame. That was a lot of fun. I met a lot of really cool makers. It was I felt like it wasn't chaotic like it was at the Blade Show. I'm talking about the show again now. And some standout makers that I met were I think his name is Ben Chacon. He was Toxic Blades, kid's 14 years old, 15 years old, but he built a hell of a knife, and I thought that was really cool. I got to talk to him and see his knives. That was the first time I met Black Snow Customs and Lee Lerman. Of course, they're all kind of in areas together, and they're all friends, so they had pods. So they kind of liked each other, and they had their fans. So that little corner of the world always had people in it, but they were very nice. And like I said, everybody at the show was extremely, extremely nice. I'm trying to think of who else that kind of was a standout for me. I saw my buddy William Touch. He was there with his son, and I saw him both at Blade Show as well. He brought some pretty awesome knives. Unfortunately, he couldn't get those as many knives as he wanted up and running for the show, so he had to show the knives that weren't for sale. I'm trying to think who else was impressive, but a lot of people, a lot of makers. I can't really think of them right now, but I thought they were all extremely fair. And what I mean by that is, most makers had, even if they only brought 2 knives, they let one knife go out on Friday and one knife go out on Saturday. So I thought that show was a lot of fun. Now, the reason why I didn't talk about these makers is because I was actually bidding on their knives. So a couple guys, Jonas Iglesias, really cool guy, Brian Efros, And the whole Shark Knife crew, I actively tried to get their open bids, and those were awesome. I only ended up with one, which I'll show you here in a second, but those guys were really cool. So, a couple things. First, if you want a knife really badly and you want it that you're going to go try to get it at open bid, be prepared to spend more than you think you're going to spend. So I'll just tell the story, which is actually one of the funnest times I've ever had in a hobby. This one's called a Tana, which is a version of the Ryu that was built by Edison Barajas at Shark Knife Co. is what he calls his company. And of course, there's him, Will Colazzo, who's a really cool guy, and then his brother Victor is just a super nice guy. And they were all grouped together, and they had magnificent knives. But I know the market, and I actually had, I have another Ryu. I'll pull that out now. So I knew that I wanted another one of Edison's knives. So I have a good idea of what those knives cost. In fact, I just bought that knife, and I see them, and everyone who's into collecting, they know what these things should cost. A good friend of mine really wanted a Ryu, and so we meet at the table during the auction. I think these both ended on Saturday, and I had an early flight back on Saturday, and I actually extended it, so it actually saved me some money, because Jonas Iglesias had some great knives, and I would just recommend, for if you're a maker and you display at the shows, end your stuff a little bit early, because I think people don't plan on being there till the very last minute. So a lot of these guys whose knives went at like 6:30 on the nose, I feel like the auctions that closed at like 2, 3, 4 o'clock, where everyone still has energy and pumped up, I think those went a little bit probably better, because I was kicking myself in the butt, because I actually reached out to Jonas afterwards and I asked him what the auction went for, and I'm like, oh my god, I would have bought that every day of the week there. But I digress. So we go to this, and with auctions, there's no value. Of course, you're supporting the maker there, and if two people want it, I mean, this knife can go for $500, but if two of the right people want it, can go for $100,000, right? That's the whole idea of an auction. So I really like the one that's on the table, that very similar to my Ryu. In fact, he had a Tana and he had a Ryu on the table, but I see my buddy bidding on it. I think I bid $4,000 on that knife, and I valued it at probably about $5,000, and I was probably prepared to go to like 55, 6, maybe, yeah. But I knew that there was some hype around that knife, but I would say that knife was 55. Again, when you are gonna bid on an auction, be prepared to spend more than it's worth. What I mean by that is Edison will probably sell that knife to you, if you're on his books, for $3,500, $4,000. So winning it at auction, I'm like, okay, I probably have to put another $1,000 or $1,500 on it. And another thing is, don't expect to get your money back. If you win a knife at auction, that is pretty much the top of the market. You are the guy who's crazy, and you're paying for that. So, kind of pet peeve of mine, when someone wins something at auction and it's like $5,000, I'm like, I won that at auction for $5,000, give me $6,000 for it. Like, if I wanted to give you $6,000, I would have given the maker $6,000 and not you $6,000. Anyway, so the knife that I like, it's a Ryu. I hold the top bid for quite some time at like, I think $4,300, and then another gentleman comes who has another Ryu, and Edison knows him as well, so I know he's real competition, and that knife shoots up to $5,000. Well, stroll in my buddy, who basically tells me out of courtesy and just says, hey, we're friends, but I am prepared to really go in on this knife, so I'm just telling you now that if you do win it, you're winning it very expensive, or you can kind of let me have it. So I understand that. I get it. Obviously, I don't want to mess with makers' pocketbooks, but I wasn't going to bid more than 55, and the other gentleman had bid 55. So I'm like, okay, I'm just withdrawing out of this. I know this is going to get hairy. I actually thought to myself that this thing's going to go over for like $7,000 maybe. I'm talking the sister knife to this one. The last 20 minutes are just the most intense thing I've ever seen, where people are gathered around, and I think Edison had one of the hottest auctions at the end. and my buddy puts in $6,000. The other guy puts in 65. My buddy's like, I'm gonna wipe you off the table, put in 75. The other guy puts in 8. I mean, I couldn't believe it, and people were getting pretty intense over this thing. And the first key is there's a lot of people there, and if there's a lot of people standing at the table when the auction's ending, it's probably gonna be expensive. And another friend of mine who I just met at the show, but I've talked to him online, leaned over and he said something, and I'm going to share it with you guys. He goes, you got to be careful bidding against someone who's standing next to their girlfriend, because it's like a pride thing. It's no longer a sensible thing. It's a pride thing. So my buddy happened to have his girlfriend with him, and it hit $8,000, and he keeps bidding. And I thought that was a good tip. So pro tip number 2 there, if you want to win something, hope that the person's boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife isn't standing next to them. Or if they are, they're not doing what my buddy's girlfriend was doing, which was encouraging him. Hopefully you got a screaming wife there saying, if you put another bid in, I'm going to kill you. Of course, that's what the other person wants. Anyway, so that knife ended up settling for, I think, $9,700, which is pretty impressive. And I'm not saying it's not worth it. Edison is a magnificent builder, and he builds some of the most unique knives. But I will tell you that from a appreciation standpoint from the last show, it was quite high. But let me show you what I got, and I bid on this, and I ended up bidding against a buddy of mine. I felt a little bit bad. Craig from Hawaii. I've actually bought stuff from him. We talked quite a bit. He's a good dude, and he was competing with me on this. So I actually paid what I consider more money than this is worth on the secondary, but I wanted to support Edison, and quite frankly, it was the only knife that was left after those other 2 crazy guys took the wonderful knife way too high. But something that Edison does better than anybody else on the planet is the tolerances. These are Stan Wilson-esque, and not only that, the knife just has a fantastic design to it. It is beautiful. One thing he has done, so you've seen the Ryu, he changed the tip to more of a Japanese kind of, obviously, katana style, which is upswept here. And he's crowned it a little bit, which is the first time I've ever seen him do that, which is very, very cool. So not only do you have these tolerances that really make the knife look fantastic, now you have this kind of crowning here, which gives it another dimension altogether. So just a very fun knife. The reason why I wanted this knife is just I love the artistic merit of the black and white, and it's carbon fiber, which I'm not a huge fan of usually, but I do like micarta. And I'll tell you, everybody, I don't know how he built this, but everyone goes, oh, you can't feel anything on a knife, and that's kind of BS. It's disingenuous. Usually when you transition, you can feel something on the very fact that the 2 different materials have a different feel to them. But most of the good makers can line them up, and if you start getting gaps and stuff like that, that just kind of shows that the maker doesn't have a command of what they're doing. But obviously, this not only has no gap there, it's almost like it was one piece built like this. You literally cannot feel this. If I blindfolded you and I said you can have $300 if you put your finger directly on the seam there, you couldn't do it. No way. So I thought from a beauty standpoint, while I liked the Timascus one, I thought this one was the mechanical marvel of the 2. Okay, so it's been 33 minutes, and I apologize if this has gone way too long, but I want to get to my only other lottery win here. I will do a video on these 2 separately. Again, I just wanted this video to be on knife shows in general, but this one also was fantastic. This is another thing. I collect Kirby Lambert knives. I have the Flipper Dauntless. I have the Flipper Compact Dauntless, and he's only ever made one of these on the planet, and I got it. Not from Kirby, though. This is the crazy part. This was at the Triple Aught Design booth, and it was just a pure lottery. And I put in for the Rexford, I put in for the Lambert, I put in, and so did everybody else, and of course, I end up with the Lambert. So I know some people are out there going, oh, God, that one was stacked. But Kirby had nothing to do with this one, even though I probably have with Eric Anderson. He's Knife Ninja. He probably has the best collection of Lamberts. But, I mean, it's like one of us winning, and everyone's just like, oh, geez, of course Kirby did that. Kirby had nothing to do with it. But what an amazing, amazing knife. And as far as the theme goes, all these makers made the topographical themes for TAD, the Triple F design, and this one was by far the best. The Carbo quartz with the core Damasteel. This one is amazing. I'll do a video on this, like I said, because it's pretty unique. It's a little bit smaller than the compact Dauntless, but this has been an amazing, awesome knife. All right, guys, I'm sorry if you wasted your 35 minutes here and you didn't get anything out of it, but I just wanted to do a video that was a little bit different and talk about my show experiences. I will be going to the California Custom Knife Show, and again, I have high hopes for that with a lot of very, very high-end makers, and I'm not sure how many people are actually flying out to California for that one, since it's kind of the first time that Recon One is doing it. But to sum it up, I can tell you, if you guys want the nicest stuff from the best makers, you have to be friends with them. That's at the end of the day. If you have a guy who's just starting out, there's a long line of other guys that are trying to be friends with them just in case they hit it big, and if you're not doing that, you're probably not going to be able to buy knives. So you probably already know that. I get it. And of course, there are other companies out there that do production stuff, which will always have knives. I think that's one thing I love about Medford and companies like that, keeping the supply lines full in case you didn't. But if you're into the hobby portion of it, I would 100% recommend getting to these knife shows, and at the very least, you get to see who builds good knives and who doesn't. But again, these are hand built, so you might have someone a knife on the table that's not fantastic, but that's not indicative. They do build some good work. But other than that, guys, I can tell you that I was very happy with my show experience. And I hope you guys get out to shows, and if you guys see me, say hi, and I wish you the best of luck, and go put in for every lottery out there. And even if you don't win, most likely a friend of yours wants that knife, and now they're going to owe you a favor. So I'd say get out there and get into the lotteries and have a good time. All right, guys, I appreciate it, and I will see you.